One of the questions we frequently hear from car buyers concerns auto insurance for electric vehicles. While the rules around auto insurance vary across Canada, many people ask how the transition from ICE to EV might impact their auto and even home insurance coverage. Hello, I'm Jason Arneaud, and welcome to our July 2nd episode of Canada Talks Electric Cars. I'm filling in for Tim Burrows today, and we are very excited to welcome our guest Adam Duliban, third generation principal broker and co-owner of Duliban Insurance Brokers. In the interests of full disclosure, we're pleased to report that Duliban Insurance Brokers have become a significant new sponsor for EV Society. This sponsorship will bring an assortment of benefits to our full EV Society members. Duliban Insurance is a leading national independent brokerage founded in 1976 and named as a top 3 brokerage in Canada by IBC and Ontario's Insurance Brokerage of the Year by the IBAO. Tonight's format will be a little different. Instead of a presentation, we're going to jump right into Q&A. I have a few questions to get things started, and I encourage all of you attending to enter your own via the Zoom Q&A function. Please note that Duliban operates in Ontario, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and PEI, so Adam will be able to speak about those specifically. However, they are working on expanding coverage to other regions. Please stay tuned for updates. Thank you, Adam, for joining us today, and welcome to our webinar. I'd like to begin by thanking you and Duliban Insurance for your support of EV Society. Would you like to do a brief introduction before we begin Q&A?
Sure, and thank you very much, Jason, for the introduction. I will say I'm very excited to be here. I'm thankful for the opportunity. We've had an independent relationship with the EV Society since 2018, one that we believe in strongly in behalf of the Electric Vehicle Society and what they bring to residents across Canada and passionate members of the EV Society. We are an independent insurance broker, which is becoming not necessarily the norm nowadays in our space. I am the third generation owner of our family business. Our grandfather started the business, and we're really excited with the progress that we've made. We independently operate as a broker in which we have relationships with 25 different contracted insurance companies. So although we do have a relationship with an insurance company, a group insurance program that offers some enhanced coverages and discounts to members of the EV Society, I can confidently speak of the general insurance market and numerous different insurance companies. EV vehicles and insurance has been a hot topic. It's relatively new for insurance companies to be participating in the space and learning more about it every day. So those learnings are becoming more found and adopted in their insurance practices. So I'm excited to talk about that today and excited to join you.
Great, thank you. Let's dive right into the questions then. The first one is, what factors are considered when determining insurance premiums for electric vehicles?
So it's a bit loaded question in a way that insurance companies historically have had 5 or 6 different rating variables for auto insurance across multiple provinces. Historically being, the territory in which they're operated with, obviously driver information, the use of vehicles, accident benefit rating in terms of how likely you are to get into an accident, how severe those damages are. But some insurance companies are now up to close to 200 different rating variables now and using data to support a lot of their rating. In particular with vehicles, they look very, very closely at historic trends on accident rating, how likely you are to get involved in an accident. Becoming a huge trend and call it an epidemic across insurance nationally is the comprehensive coverage, which is fire and in particular theft. And the fact that ICE vehicles are leading the trend with some very high theft rates, which is having a big effect on the industry. So that's a very big consideration. They are considering parts, availability of parts, how likely it is to be able to be involved in an accident in a claim scenario, how fast insurance companies pay out claims in particular the cost to rent a vehicle and a common vehicle, such as a EV of similar to what you're in before. Telematics is becoming a really big thing with insurance companies. Some insurance companies, in a way, that they're providing additional discounts for things like how often you're braking, your acceleration, your hours of driving in between, call it 2 o'clock and 5 o'clock in the morning. So there's a lot of different rating variables that are now part of auto insurance that hadn't been before.
Okay, thank you. And related to that, I guess, is how does the insurance claims process differ between EVs and traditional ICE vehicles?
The big consideration, obviously, on vehicles is the battery, making sure that the battery can be replaced. And if it is damaged in any way, what that looks like, what the process is in terms of the length of time that you're out of that electric vehicle. The loss of use coverage for a rental vehicle is becoming a bigger cost to insurance companies to provide you the duration in which you're out of the vehicle while it's being repaired. Has obviously, because of parts availability, has extended itself. So typically there's a limit on the policy of, call it $1,500, $2,000. A lot of insurance companies are now giving the option to increase that coverage because of demand, because of requirements and length and times claims are settling. And that's becoming a big consideration as well.
I want to skip back a little bit. You mentioned loss of use. You also mentioned replacement vehicles. I had a similar situation last year where took my EV in for repair and was issued a rental gas car. Do you find a lot of insurance companies struggling with providing appropriate replacements, or is that becoming easier?
It's becoming easier because it was very, very difficult based on supply within the rent-a-vehicle space. Companies such as Enterprise, Budget, they didn't have the fleet equipped to be able to provide an EV option. And I will say that is improving, but insurance companies in general are at the mercy of the rental car facilities and the companies. And some companies are better than others in terms of being able to source those out. You do have the requirement to be put back into a vehicle similar to what you had before, should you have loss of use coverage, as long as it's available. I mean, if there's no car that's available, it'd be very difficult to put you in one of them. But I would say that is becoming easier than it has been with companies like Enterprise, like Budget, Avis, some of the larger rental car companies investing in their EV fleets.
Great, thank you. Uh, Here's a nice open question. What are the common misconceptions about insuring electric vehicles?
It's a good question. I would say that all EVs are the same. And I think we're learning now that that's not the case, that some of the, call it domestic carriers that are coming out with EV vehicles, their parts are becoming more readily available, which is a really good thing. Obviously, every EV is different based on the frequency and severity of claims that they endure. So learning more, having more EVs on the road in the market is a good thing, and more data is being exposed in that regard. Other thing as well is, the impacts of home chargers in parking stations, asking the question as to who owns that obviously that charger and the impact, should there be a loss, is becoming a big question as well.
And that was also on my list. Do you find a lot of EV owners having to make claims or needing coverage for their home charging equipment? Is that typically just covered under their homeowner policy then?
Most insurance companies do provide an extension for EV chargers should there be a direct loss to it. Chargers under a home insurance policy typically are not covered for things like wear and tear or reaching the end of its life expectancy. But it would be, and it should be, and something to check with your insurance company, if there is things like fire, if there is things like mechanical failure, breakdown, for example, power interruption, if there is a physical loss to the unit, and there should be full replacement costs, being there's no depreciation, but it is something to check. Most insurance companies are now going down this road, and it is important consideration, especially if you have multiple units, or if you've invested in a more expensive unit to obviously feed multiple vehicles or a higher end unit in general.
That segues nicely into a general question about, are there differences in liability coverage between EVs and ICE vehicles?
So liability in the auto insurance is defined by potentially getting involved in an accident causing injury, property damage, or injury to others. Whereas their liability insurance, your liability would protect you in the event of a lawsuit. I would not say that there's an increase in liability situations. In fact, I feel in many cases EV vehicles are more safe based on some of the technology that they do present. So, in fact, the damage that you would cause to others via people or property is better, and in fact, more data is becoming provided on that. The other case is if you are being sued for any damages that you would cause, some of the technology on EV vehicles are more available in a way where things like the dash cams, things like become more standard within some of the higher technology vehicles, can help support those claims and ultimately reduce the likelihood of larger liability cases.
Great. Thank you to everyone in the audience. I'm seeing a bunch of questions coming in. Reminder that not only can you submit questions, you can also upvote questions that you like, so they bubble to the top of the heap. I'm going to take the top one right now. What's the root cause for abnormally high EV insurance rates in comparison to ICE vehicles?
It's a great question. I will say that historically, the cost to repair, the cost to replace EV vehicles compared to ICE vehicles has predominantly been the main driver of premiums. Parts availability, parts cost has obviously been higher than maybe a domestic ICE vehicle. I will say that we do see in the market that those costs to repair are coming down. Parts are becoming generally more available, and thus help with claim severity on EV vehicles versus ICE vehicles. The other aspect to that I want to build on as well is that in particular in most provinces, theft is becoming an epidemic. Insurance companies there's been some national articles as to what positions they're taking, whether that be premium surcharges, whether that be mandatory theft prevention devices that are mandatory on clients owning certain vehicles. And we're not seeing that obviously with EV vehicles in a way that their theft rates are much lower. One, because of the technology, and two, because mostly by definition where they're going doesn't have the infrastructure to support EV vehicles. So for that reason, we're seeing pretty large spikes with some ICE vehicles in terms of their rating, their premiums assigned via theft, which represents close to 6 to 7% of the overall premium now, where we're not seeing that increase on EV vehicles. In fact, we're seeing reductions in premium on the comprehensive section of the premium.
That's really encouraging. It's the kind of thing you instinctually think may be happening, but it's nice that you're actually seeing those numbers.
In most provinces, there's what's called, and there's different terms for it in different provinces, but mostly it's called direct compensation property damage. Whereas, you're doing everything right, you're not at fault for an accident, you're hit by a third party. But the reality is to repair or replace your vehicle is your insurance company's responsibility. That's no fault insurance. That's direct compensation property damage, which means you're only dealing with your own insurance company. You're not dealing with a third party's company. So for that reason, a lot of EV owners, there is a lot of technology in place with increasing safety for how you operate the vehicle. But unfortunately, there's still a lot of more people on the road. There's still a risk of something happening. And even if they hit you, it's your insurance company's responsibility to repair or replace the vehicle. So although, maybe you were not at fault, it's still your insurance company bearing that cost. So unfortunately, in today's environment, with accidents being at an all-time high, with number of drivers being on the road and maybe distracted driving, in particular for some ICE vehicle owners, that is having a general impact across, all vehicle owners and all insurance providers.
Okay. Another audience question from Paul. He says, I've been insured by Duliban for some years. Can you talk a little bit about the arrangement that is there for EV Society?
Yeah. Hi, Paul. It's thanks for the question, and obviously, thank you very much for being a valued client of our family business. Um, it's historically started in its infancy. We believe in the EV Society. We believe in the advocacy and the knowledge and that it brings to the general public. So it started there. It's becoming more of a friendship than anything else. There's different type of group insurance providers that are out there. There's companies that will provide potentially discounted rates for, you know, um, people that hold certain careers or designations. We were very fortunate, although we represent 25 different insurance companies, which I'll talk of, but we were very interested to be able to arrange what's called an affinity group insurance program, which we have successfully done in 2018 with a company called Aviva Insurance, which is the nation's top third or fourth largest insurance company. The affinity group is unique to Aviva. There's not many companies in Canada that will provide it, that will provide a discount to general members of general advocacy groups. They don't necessarily need to hold any designations, but rather just be part of the group. And in turn, because of Aviva being a very strong advocate of EV vehicles and a goal to become a net zero company, they were very interested and excited to join Duliban Insurance in our partnership with the EV Society. So in partnership with Aviva, we do offer a discount for all EV vehicles. Aviva provides this generally right across the board of 15% for any EV vehicles. On top of that, we are offering an additional 15% for any member of the EV Society. There's also some increased coverages with our program, one of which is a full replacement cost of home chargers should there be a claim. They will provide an incentive should your vehicle be written off and you have an ICE vehicle and you are looking to replace it with an EV vehicle. They will provide you incentivized claim settlement to be able to do that. They do have on top of that a commitment to provide various communities with additional charging stations as well as part of their commitment to a greener environment. So that's something that we believe in strongly as well. So we are an independent broker. We are a proud partner of Aviva. We're very excited to be a group provider of the EV Society, but we do proudly represent 24 other insurance companies as well. So we do survey the marketplace to always find the best in terms of coverages and premium. That's something we take a lot of pride in. Most of the time, I would say that that's a really good fit with Aviva, but because of your individual circumstances, that might change, and that might allow you to be a better fit with a different company, which, you know, we have an allegiance to our clients to make sure they always have the best premium and the best coverages. So that's something that we always recommend.
Thank you. And Paul, to address the rest of your question, there should be a communication coming out to EV Society members with more detail on this, which I think will help you out with your renewal. Adam, I think you've touched on this question, so this may be a really quick answer, but Tom asks, who's the most EV-friendly insurance provider in Canada?
There are companies that have invested themselves in EV vehicles. I would say historically, Aviva is a global leader when it comes to a green commitment. Although we represent numerous different insurance companies, certainly Aviva is a national and global leader in that regard.
Okay, thank you. Back to some of my questions. What advice would you give new EV owners regarding insurance coverage?
It's a great question. Yeah. I would suggest to do your homework with respect to not only your auto insurance, in terms of the limits of coverage provided, in particular, your loss of use coverage, the ability to have limited depreciation coverage on your vehicle should you buy it brand new. That is important coverage to have and ensure there's no depreciation in the event of a total loss, but also your home insurance as well. What does your liability look like in terms of if you were sued for property damage that your own charger would create? What does that insurance coverage for your charger look like? Is there replacement cost involved? And to do your general homework as to what the insurance company, what your broker believes in, and the value that they can present to you, not only in the event of arranging coverages, but servicing the coverage moving forward, giving you, coverage recommendations, which is very critical in our space, but also to help you every step along the way in the claim, because the claim process, it does differ than that of, a standard ICE vehicle. There's some various different complications, and it's important to have an advocate beside you that helps you along the way through what can be a unique experience in your life that doesn't happen all the time.
Brian says, I have great difficulty finding a company to insure my property because I live in an Ontario high-rise condo and have my own EV charger at my owned parking space. Others in my building have experienced the same. Why is that? And I guess the second part of that would be, is there anything that he can do?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We have experienced that with some insurance companies, and I will say that insurance comes in different shapes and sizes. There's different ways to obtain insurance, in particular through agencies, through the direct model of directly going to the insurance company. We feel very fortunate to have working relationships with 25 different insurance companies. And if an insurance company has a problem or a concern with any one particular item, such as this one, we have the ability to source, coverage and premiums from multiple different insurance companies. So I will say your situation of owning a charger in a condo building is not necessarily unique in today's environment. It does, it might involve some involvement from the condo corporation to spell out, what you're responsible to do and what you need to do as a property owner of that charger. But there are numerous insurance companies and growing that would not foresee that to be an issue whatsoever.
Okay. Doug asks, where can we find the data on the theft rates for various makes and models? Is that publicly available? Avoiding purchase of vehicles prone to theft or paying extra for theft prevention devices would be likely to help reduce what we pay for insurance.
It's a great question. There are articles being released daily as to the growing concern of theft, and like previously, which is a stat that I've learned, from insurance companies, which I thought was very interesting. A theft portion of your premium historically has been less than about 1%. If you pay $100 on your insurance, you pay $1 associated with the risk of theft for your vehicle. Today, on particular ICE vehicles, that premium is over 6% with most insurance companies. There's surcharges being assigned to vehicles that are high theft. There are requirements associated with theft prevention, theft devices. And some insurance companies are taking different perspectives as it relates to their requirements. Some insurance companies recently has gone as far as surcharging policies by up to $1,500 per vehicle on high theft vehicles. If you do not obtain immobilization requirements, which goes further and above than what a preventive device, things like clubs, things like tag, which doesn't necessarily, a tag device doesn't necessarily deter theft from happening. And insurance companies are starting to trend towards prevention of theft, and that's becoming a bigger trend. To answer your question, there are stats that are out there. Some of those stats, can be found on the Insurance Bureau of Canada's website. There's different stats out there if you throughout Google as well. Historically, those stats, represent figures from say 2022 or so, which is becoming a bigger trend every single month since then. So as more information gets released, it's showing really how big this problem actually is.
And I guess if it comes down to it, if you're in the market for a vehicle, you can probably just talk to your broker or talk to your insurer and see what suggestions they have.
100%. And, we are seeing things become, on top of just premium and requirements, there's also deductible changes on particular vehicles. whereas insurance companies are mandating, say, a $5,000 deductible on certain vehicles for comprehensive. So it's becoming a really big trend. Insurance companies are taking different perspectives on how to deal with it, but certainly doing your research is the first step to that, for sure.
Okay. Oh, this is a highly upvoted question. Some condos are banning charging due to perceived fire hazard. Is there any real basis for this?
I don't personally believe there is. Yes, there's been some claims. Historically, I think it's a lot of maybe condo corporations that maybe haven't done necessarily their homework as much as they can or they should, associated with charging stations. Some of the charging stations, their manufacturers early on, if they've manufactured a faulty product, typically that would come to light in the event of a loss. The insurance company would pay that claim out and then ultimately subrogate, against the negligent manufacturer. So I think there was a couple of scenarios early on in the process, and that certainly was prevalent. However, they've become more readily available. I think more information is becoming known, and in turn, the risk appetite is largening. So I think as you move forward, we shouldn't see that many scenarios of that.
Thank you. On the repair front, Mark asks, are traditional dealerships not adequately providing trained service technicians to quickly repair damaged EVs, therefore raising repair costs borne by the insurance industry?
I think that's a great question, and 100%. I think that's an issue. If you ask any mechanic, I think that there's a void in the industry of qualified mechanics coming through, and a good mechanic is becoming very hard to come by, in particular for the EV space, because you're involving somebody that's a trade that's maybe not as technology, doesn't have the training or the education in their schooling as they can with some of the technology that's coming out. So to answer your question, I think you're spot on. There's a bit of a void in the marketplace, and I think that there should be some incentive on behalf of the government, further incentive for people to join that space, to join that as a career, and to be able to learn more about EV vehicles and repair and maintenance of those vehicles as well.
The next question makes me think of BC because it's the province that comes immediately to mind. Ron asks, are the considerations roughly the same for public government insurance in comparison to private insurance?
It's a great question. We do not operate in BC. Obviously, the landscape is completely different, although there are significant challenges in BC on mandating certain coverages and making sure that it's affordable for everybody, while adapting to the challenges. So, I would say that some of their challenges are unique to ICBC, if it is BC that you're referring to. However, they do have their own challenges with spreading out, the claims across everybody, and making sure that they're taking a wider lens to provide insurance coverages for all members of the province. And in doing so, some of the safer drivers, the vehicles, the drivers that have not had the claims seem to suffer more in those types of environments historically.
Okay. Ron says, here in the US, State Farm Insurance and maybe others provides discounts to policyholders that agree to install a beacon that tracks acceleration, braking, speed, etc. And you mentioned this as well earlier on. What are the pros and cons to the policyholders for this sort of thing?
It's a great question. So in the Canadian marketplace, just to give you some comparison, of the 25 different insurance companies that we represent, approximately about 11 companies provide telematic discounts and telematic devices, which do track generally. They track your acceleration, how many times you're accelerating very fast, your hard braking, your hours of driving, to name a few. Those are the main variables. On top of the ability to provide an immediate discount to go down that road and to be able to install the device or go through the app. They do provide additional discounts as well based on how you're doing in those metrics. Some insurance companies are now providing kind of a pay-as-you-go solution, which do track your annual kilometers, and they bill you initially for the X kilometers in which you disclose, and then anything over and above that. And they do measure your telematics as well, which is inclusive of the braking, the acceleration, and the hours of driving as well. So it's not too common. There are a couple different insurance companies that have now taken the route of providing mostly a discount relating to how you're driving, with the exception of a few now providing some surcharges associated with the metrics. The take up is becoming larger. People are becoming more comfortable with that in the Canadian landscape. Insurance companies are not able to use that data for anything other than those metrics and being able to provide that as a means to rate your policy. So they can't necessarily sell off that data, and they're very restricted to how they use it. So it's becoming more prevalent. I would, suggest that if we were to sell 100 auto insurance policies, approximately 20 to 25 would be okay to be able to, install a telematics device, whether that be a conventional device or through the app, through the phone. And that is becoming a larger population now.
Okay. I'm surprised that the percentage is that high, actually. In Canada specifically, are they allowed to track and factor in GPS location, or are they purely looking at things like acceleration and braking?
For personal auto insurance, typically insurance companies do not use rating in terms of territory to involve the rating of your policy. You have a responsibility as a policyholder to ensure your garaged vehicle location is up to date. You're able to use the vehicle as long as it's described as such within the policy, where you want to use it, so to speak, right? If there are areas in which you are operating that's a common destination, it's something that you have to report to the insurance company. But typically, the insurance companies are not using GPS tracking devices to, increase the rate or change rating on your policy. That can differ on behalf of commercial fleet solutions, where they work in unison with the fleet monitoring devices, which can potentially use territories as part of the rating algorithms.
Okay. This jumps back to the garage fire comment, or the condo comment. Doug says, I've seen data which suggests on an equal basis that there are 20 to 200 ICE vehicle fires for every EV fire. Mm-hmm. Does the insurance data that you're seeing suggest similar rates, implying that the fire cost for EV insurance should be less than an ICE vehicle?
Yeah, I can't speak on behalf of that particular stat, but I would suggest that the EV trends, now that they're becoming more prevalent in the marketplace, I think with more data, we'll show that as well as we go forward. And with more EVs being on the road, that's something whereas insurance companies are becoming more comfortable with that data, which is a good thing. So I will suggest that, I would say that I believe that EV vehicle fires are less prevalent than ICE vehicles, which is a great thing. Fire premiums, I wouldn't say it's a risk. Obviously, it's a coverage that's an important coverage to have. Theft is becoming more of a concern than in particular with fires. So,
okay, let's look a little forward. What future trends do you foresee in the EV insurance market? Anything interesting coming up?
Yeah, I think as we look back, before we look forward, I think the number of EV manufacturers coming on board, you have a lot of the domestic carriers obviously coming out with EV solutions that are not just an option, but becoming a viable option for many. So with that becomes more data on EV vehicles, which in turn I think allows a lot of the rhetoric, which we all know, which, things like theft, things like the fire that we mentioned, things like some of the technology around becoming a safer driver is a very good thing. And once they become more prevalent, we will see the rating come down. Once they become more prevalent on used vehicles, parts availability will help drive the premium down with respect to the claims, severity in the marketplace. I think that's a big thing. We see that with insurance companies. We see them tracking the severity, the total cost per average per claim. And I do see that really trending downwards for the EV society, for the EV market in general.
Okay. I think you touched on most of this, but if there is anything else you would like to add, uh, how do insurance policies cover EV charging equipment and infrastructure?
So EV charging stations should be an extension of the home insurance coverages. That is a normal extension on behalf of home insurance, and most carriers offer it. I would preface that by saying to check with your home insurance company. Some carriers have a special limit associated with a home charging station that might be $1,000, that might be $2,500. There's other companies that offer no limit associated with that coverage, and it's a direct extension of the home insurance. That would be for homeowners. If you are renting and have tenants insurance in place, that would be a great question as to ensuring the owned EV charger is a direct extension of your contents insurance. And same thing goes for your condo insurance as well. If you own the charging station but do not own the building, to ensure with your provider that your contents insurance directly includes that of your purchased and owned EV charger.
So in short, don't assume that your home insurance is going to cover it adequately. Make sure that you specifically discuss this with your provider.
Yes.
Okay. How do battery replacement costs for an EV impact insurance rates? I know this is something that EV owners laugh about because battery replacements are things that we hardly ever do, but are a huge part of the discussion among non-EV owners.
It's a great question. I will say the scenarios can differ. If you are looking to replace your battery simply because of wear and tear, I think we all know, they have a large life expectancy, and that's holding to be true with a lot of manufacturers. But in the event of an accident, in a scenario where perhaps you're not at fault, you're hit by a third party, and that battery is damaged, that has historically contributed to higher premiums for EV owners in a way that those costs have been high. It's obviously a large cost, in particular because the supply wasn't as prevalent as it had been previously. That is starting to improve now. Obviously, with different types of batteries that are out there, different manufacturers now gaining additional market share, those batteries are becoming more readily available, and it's a really good thing.
Okay, back to the theft angle, Deborah is asking, why are manufacturers not providing better anti-theft devices? Stealing key fob signals and reprogramming computers seems to be too easy.
I 100% agree with that. And I guess speaking on behalf of an insurance broker, not a manufacturer, I do believe the manufacturers have to do more. I, for one, have had an experience with my brother that had his vehicle stolen, which was a very emotional experience. It was done, so I want to say 3 months ago. We own the business together, being Duliban Insurance, and even though he's involved in the business, it was a very emotional time for him and his family. And I'm sure if anybody's have had anything stolen, it's not a good feeling. Obviously, his first call was to his insurance company, and second call would have been to the vehicle manufacturer and the dealership to potentially buy a new vehicle. So I think that naturally, I think that manufacturers are not maybe jumping to conclusion to be able to do more because of the epidemic that it's creating and because of the need to replace those particular vehicles. Again, I'm not speaking on behalf of manufacturers, just my thought process on that. But I do feel that manufacturers should be doing more associated with anti-theft devices, built-in tag, built-in immobilizers that are safe. And I think they should be working with insurance companies and government alike to be able to reduce the likelihood of theft.
Okay, this is a very specialized one, and if you haven't had this experience, let me know. But Is there a difference in insurance rates between Teslas with full self-driving and those without?
There's not. No, there's not. That is specialized in terms of the VIN number for the vehicle, obviously. And if you are purchasing self-driving, you know, it's a consideration, but there has not been a significant increase in rating for self-driving at this point. I think it's becoming more known to insurance companies, and hopefully it's something where it does reduce the risk of something happening, and in turn it will help the premiums. But at this point, there's no surcharge associated with self-driving. There's no automatic reduction for self-driving in a way where there's significant discounts or alleviation from those base rates. Some insurance companies are providing a bit of a discount for autonomous driving. However, it's not a significant discount at this time. That's very material.
Interesting to hear that it is being considered at all. I'm surprised that at this level of adoption, they're factoring it in.
I think of consideration to insurance companies, obviously, is not necessarily just the risk of you getting into an at-fault accident, but also the fact that if you are hit by somebody else, and the accidents, the claims that are being incurred in the marketplace today are greater than ever. And even if you're self-driving and you're doing everything the right way, being hit by another driver is a real risk, and it's a real possibility of being injured in that claim. Obviously, not just having vehicle damage, but also the accident benefits that come with it as well.
Okay. Mark asks, do you foresee a time where EV insurance rates will begin to fall considerably, somewhat in line with ICE vehicles, once a certain percentage of yearly sales have been hit?
I do. I see that trend already starting. We've seen this trend the last 2 or 3 years. Insurance companies are becoming more comfortable with vehicles in the marketplace. More data is being established. Like I said, the parts availability and supply installation is trending downwards. The theft is increasing amongst ICE vehicles. And for those reasons, we've already started to see where EV vehicles premiums are going down. And I think that's an important consideration, and we see that trend continuing.
Okay. Lots of interest in fire. Ted asks, would you recommend a garage fire detector? If so, make and model, any suggestions?
Not any one particular provider. I would suggest that we've seen a few enter the marketplace, and just maybe to do your homework associated with the warranty and the services they're providing. There's some subscription models that are out there as well. Some have some value in them. Some have a risk detector associated with not just fire, but other means, such as maybe water, especially in cases where there's lower parking levels than the ground level. So there's some different options that are out there, and just to do your homework based on some of the reviews that are out there.
Okay. You've touched on most of this already, so if there isn't much to say, just let me know. Rob asks, is Duliban's EV insurance program considered group insurance? I think you said it is. Do EV drivers represent overall a lower than average risk to support a lower or discounted insurance rate?
So we do have a group insurance program, and one that we're very proud of. Our partnership with the EV Society spans not just discounted premiums, but just a general partnership, and ultimately wanted to give back to something that we believe in. That's number one. Number two, we do believe that EV vehicles and owners are that of a demographic that is a lower risk, ones that obviously take the ability to focus on where you're driving, how you're driving, the level of detail required with making sure that you can get to point A and B, and also protect an asset, which is very important to you as well. So for that reason, we do see it as a good demographic. We do see EV rates trending because of the reasons that I've talked about as well.
Okay, and the second part is, again, something you've touched on, but how do EV damageability, repairability, and the level of built-in vehicle technology impact insurance rates? I'm sure that's a big driver.
It's significant, and it's I would be amiss to say that that's not impacting insurance premiums generally. We had an example, whereas this was going back approximately 6 months, just a direct example, where it was actually a BMW. It wasn't an ICE vehicle, it was an EV vehicle. However, they were sideswiped and lost their driver's side mirror. And we had reported the claim to the insurance company. The vehicle was approximately about $75,000 in total replacement cost value. And we reported the claim, as did the vehicle owner, thinking that the repair cost should be approximately about $5,000. And they ended up actually writing the vehicle off. And we were incredibly taken back by that. And the reason being is because that particular mirror, they had over 100 different pieces of technology going through the mirror, feeding through the mirror to other parts of the vehicle. And because of the cost to replace that technology in that driver's side mirror, deemed that vehicle to be a write-off. So for that reason, and that's an isolated example. Maybe that's not specific to all vehicles or makes or models, but that is something where technology and cost to repair is having a direct impact, in the industry and the cost associated with repair as well.
That is a phenomenal example. And I know EVs are really prevalent for that, but ICE vehicles are not far behind either in terms of some of the tech being crammed into them.
And that's having an impact. The vehicle costs are having an impact as to the insurance rating as well. We talk about theft, and if you look on the high theft rates of some of these vehicles, call it a Dodge Ram, for example, is on the high theft rating for vehicles. And a brand new truck, it used to be, call it 30, 40, $50,000. Now on average it's 80. So these vehicles are being stolen at a high clip. They're not $30,000 to $40,000 to replace. They're 75 to 80, and the average premium in Ontario and less in that of other provinces, being Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, PEI, is approximately about $1,600. So you got to think how many times you have to pay your insurance premium just to replace that one particular vehicle that was damaged or written off or stolen.
David asks, do you cover electric motorcycles?
We have insurance companies that are starting to write insurance for EV motorcycles. There is a couple of manufacturers that have now entered the marketplace. It's becoming more prevalent. I would say that there was a few different manufacturers that were of international descent that had entered a few years ago that insurance companies would not insure, but there are a couple of different manufacturers now that are becoming more prevalent, and it's becoming more of an option now than it has been in the past.
And the second part of that question is about the differentiation between, true electric motorcycles versus e-bikes. Do e-bikes come into the picture at all? When talking about battery fires, it seems that e-bikes hit the headlines a lot.
They do. They absolutely do. We've had some examples of that as well. I think e-bikes aren't necessarily as regulated as some of the private passenger vehicles or motorcycles, for example. There's a lot of different offshoot manufacturers of those. They're not tested, or there's no necessarily as much warranty on some of them. So, for example, for that reason, they've caused some fires, and there's been a lot of conversation on that topic. So, e-bikes are not, in various different provinces, they're treated differently than vehicles. If they are able or licensed for the road versus non, in particular, different e-bikes could be classified differently, whether there be a vehicle or not, and then the requirement to hold public auto insurance in that capacity. So they are considered mostly by different provinces different from that of motorcycles. But just watch, if you are buying an e-bike, what type of manufacturer you're buying, and their reputation they uphold for things like fire, as an example.
Ian asks, and I think this is a great question, did hybrid vehicles ever have the problems we see EV owners having with insurance, or is this some sort of social issue?
I guess maybe further define your question as to what those problems are, if you're referring to premiums, I would say that a hybrid vehicle maybe hasn't experienced the premiums that a general EV vehicle has, typically because mostly they're domestic vehicles with generally more domestic parts. So for that reason, they haven't seen the increases in that of premiums like some EV vehicles have experienced. But typically, they've experienced some issues mechanically, which is mostly more of a warranty issue than it would be an insurance product issue. Insurance would not cover general wear and tear, general, maintenance of the vehicle per se. So that's not something that insurance companies would dabble into. Hopefully, I answered your question.
Okay. This is a question that I never even considered. Can you explain the presence, if they exist, and the impact of government incentives and rebates on EV insurance?
Yeah,
Is
and
that a
that's
thing?
that is a great question. And different provinces handle their rebates different ways. It is something whereas if you have a vehicle for an electric vehicle and if you write that vehicle off, you do have to disclose that to the insurance company in terms of if you did collect a rebate. It would be unremiss to be able to go through a claims process, collect the full settlement of the vehicle while redeeming the rewards of the government incentive after the fact. In fact, you'd be profiting in the event of that claim. So it is something you do need to disclose to the insurance company. And typically those claim settlements would be reduced by the government incentive that you've obtained. The idea of insurance is obviously to be able to put you back in the same financial position as you were before the loss. So if you receive a full settlement of the vehicle plus the government incentive, that would deter that principle.
Makes sense. Andy asks about getting a quote. So if he's interested in doing business with Duliban, how do you suggest he get started?
It's a great question. Certainly I'm here today excited about presenting some facts and my opinions about the EV Society and EV insurance in general. So certainly today is not necessarily about Duliban Insurance, but although we'd love to help, more information can be found on our website, dulibaninsurance.com. It includes some information about our partnership with EV Society. EV Society and Duliban Insurance are working together in terms of just providing some further overview about our partnership and its perks to all members and prospective members as well.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. So I'm just scrolling through the list to see if I can find a good one for you. Here's an interesting one. We talked about FSD. What do you see as the future insurance strategy when it comes to fully self-driving vehicles?
It's a great question. Just being a business owner, like maybe some of you are, or management positions, you kind of always think about your business being 1, 3, 5 years out. So we're constantly kind of thinking about, that timeline. I would say that within that timeline being 1, 3, 5 years, that certainly autonomous vehicles are becoming more prevalent, and full self-driving is a different conversation, of course. But for the next foreseeable future, you always see an environment where there's going to be, conventionally driven vehicles. And the way that auto insurance is set up, whereas if you are hit by a third party, whereas there's no fault insurance involved, insurance companies are still providing coverages for that. So I don't see a massive trend towards that. I do see more onus being placed on the manufacturer, and goes down the line in terms of who's responsible for what. But certainly some more onus and responsibility on the manufacturer, and you're perhaps paying for that as part of the purchase price of the autonomous vehicles. So I do see a world where, obviously we all see a world where there's autonomous vehicles throughout. How the insurance landscape changes as a result of that is maybe a question for me that's past 5 years, so to speak. and I don't know exactly from the liability concerns of how that will shape or how that will play out, but it's a great question and something that we're all giving a lot of thought to.
Okay, I will wrap things up there. Thank you, Adam, for all of those answers, handling them on the fly. Um, Thank you for providing all of this valuable information. Thank you, everyone from the audience, for providing all those questions. And thank you again for Duliban's support of EV Society. So I'll just launch into the wrap up, and we will call it a night. We strongly recommend that anyone who is in a position to review their home and or auto insurance policies reach out to Duliban for an estimate. Adam mentioned their website, Duliban Insurance, and it costs you nothing to get an estimate, and you may be surprised by how much your EV Society membership will save you. These offers are available to paid members of EV Society, and membership is just $50 a year. Finally, I'd like to thank Adam for being here tonight. I'd like to thank our supporting webinar team and all of you in the audience for choosing to spend some time with us tonight. Next month on Canada Talks Electric Cars, we are privileged to welcome back world-renowned battery researcher Dr. Jeff Don, Professor Emeritus at Dalhousie University. Dr. Don will discuss some of the latest issues surrounding battery development and answer your EV and battery-related questions. Please remember to mark the date, Tuesday, August 6th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. On behalf of all of us at EV Society, we thank you for joining, and this concludes today's webinar.